Welcome to the Monday, October 13th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me on Twitter at JBFantasySports. Alongside me, as always, our guy Jake Letarski. You can follow him at RotoJake. We're going to be going over the priority waiver wire ads. This might be a first in the history of us doing the show, Jake, where I actually don't know if there's a single player outside of Kimani Vidal that needs to be a priority ad. So we can debate the merits of who are the top 5, top 10 waiver wire pickups overall this week and what's the strategy for it. Of course, only 2 teams on bye as well, too, which is a good thing for some people. Unfortunately, bad news if you have Bills players in particular, because they will be one of the only 2 teams in the Lamarless Jaxson Ravens part of that equation as well, too. So we'll get to the lackluster waiver wire options, and I have a feeling if you guys are watching this video via the waiver wire article, which we posted later today on RotoWire, the updated added players are going to make a big difference throughout the week as we get more confirmation and clarity on a lot of these injuries impacting things, and 2 games happening Monday Night Football as well, too, which will make things difficult from a waiver wire perspective. So, Jake, let's start this off. I think both of us agree Kimani Vidal is probably the top waiver wire pickup, and the only unfortunate issue is any savvy league, he's probably already rostered. He's at 31% roster rate right now on Yahoo.
Yeah, exactly. Kimani Vidal was someone that, of course, we featured last week. The conversation was largely centered on Hassan Haskins because he was already there and contributing and playing snaps. But when push came to shove here, it was Vidal that essentially took over that backfield and had a great game. Carried the ball 18 yards for 124 or 18 times for 124 yards, popped off some big plays in there, had a touchdown catch. The Dolphins, for what it's worth, have been atrocious against opposing running backs, and especially the PPR kind of backs. And then, meanwhile, you have Hassan Haskins coming in 6 carries, 14 yards, 1 catch for 9 yards. Just not super involved here in the offense. And if you go down and look at snap counts even, Vidal had 43 to Haskins 20. And it was all Kimani Vidal. So it looks like for now he's the lead back. He has to be the number 1 pickup by default. He's 31% rostered in Yahoo leagues, so meets our threshold. But like you mentioned, Joe, there's a lot of guys, a lot of savvy owners had picked him up as a spec ad last week. I mean, none of our 14-team leagues he's around. So, but go for it if you can. Now, there are some concerns here. The Chargers are going to be buyers at the deadline. Do they end up making a move for a Breece Hall? Maybe not Alvin Kamara like we discussed, or Jerome Ford. And, this week could be a big reaction just based on the matchup, how good the matchup was and how well he succeeded there. So he's not without his potential red flags, but for now, you have a lead back on the wire available in 69% of leagues. I think he has to be the top ad, and you go grab him.
Yeah, I agree with you. Almost to the point where in a 12-team league, if you're like my friend Brian Drake, who we both play in a league together, it's a bench of 6 roster spots. I think he has all 6 that are running backs, because that's where we're at right now in the season, where you can kind of just speculate on those. You might be able to drop Hassan Haskins. And I'm frustrated because we had this conversation last week, and I had said, I don't think Hassan Haskins is very good. Like, if I'm the guy in charge of the Chargers, I will be using Kimani Vidal over Haskins. Then you had Daniel Popper earlier that week talk about Hassan Haskins being the next guy up, and then it was a split backfield of 2, and then Hassan Haskins isn't very used. Like, in my mind, there's no practical purpose to have Hassan Haskins other than be a special teams guy or a 3 down or 3 yards in a cloud of dust ball carrier near the red zone. Like, that's not useful to have on my roster. Kimani Vidal could be. I still contend if Amari Hampton's only going to be out a month. Now, there were reports, I think, this weekend that it could be even longer than that you as the Chargers could trade for Jerome Ford and have Ford work in conjunction with Amari Hampton. Now, if it is longer than that, a guy like Breece Hall, with how bad the Jets are, makes a lot more sense. I still think the Chargers will make a move. There's multiple weeks before the deadline. It's a complicating factor. In the leagues in which Kimani Vidal is available, again, 69% of Yahoo leagues, I don't know, in a 10-team league, I understand it. Rico Dowdle a couple weeks ago would have been a perfect example of capitalizing on that, but there's going to be a situation either because the Chargers won't face such an inferior opponent like they did against the Dolphins this week, or just due to other circumstances where Vidal, I think, runs out of like a a runway to be able to have fantasy utility out of this.
Yeah, coming up, I mean, Vidal is against the Colts. They're a top 10 defense against opposing backs. But then he's got the Vikings, who are 21, and the Titans, who are 29. So the rest of that Hampton window is looking, a little bit more promising for someone like Vidal. But you're right. What happens if or when they make some kind of move here? So, yeah, he's interesting. I think, like you said, a 10-team league. I'm not quite sure I would be using a ton, if any, FAAB in a 10-team league because you're probably not that hard up. But, I could see 15 to 20%, I guess, in other leagues after that.
Yeah, and it's possible if you're missing James Cook this week or Derrick Henry that you just need a spot play, and I think Vidal can do that. He won't have as massive a game because he's not going against the Dolphins. They're one of the more pathetic defenses. If you're playing Judkins this week, right, Browns versus Dolphins, Judkins might have a similar opportunity with his workload. So we're going to have to see, but Vidal does, I think, make the obvious pickup list, as does, I think, Bam Knight, Cardinals running back. Now, it's interesting. I broke this down pretty heavily in the Waiver Wire article, which should be up on the site here later today. Cardinals have the Packers. Cardinals have then a Week 8 bye. Between Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison, do you think, Jake, the Cardinals will put either or both of those guys out there? Marvin Harrison dealing with a concussion. He left in the first half of that Colts loss. And then Kyler Murray had that ankle issue, foot issue, after the ball was snapped in his head. There was an assumption that he would play this weekend. I thought he would too. And then Jacoby Brissett's out there and actually looks good. Against the Packers, do you have both Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray out there? Because I do think that changes the equation if Bam Knight is at all useful in fantasy.
Yeah, so my first run through and trying to make a top 5 pickups here, I put Bam Knight as number 2 after Vidal, but then I started looking deep into it, and I actually bumped him down to number 5. He's still ad worthy, not a huge or any FAAB selection really, but there's another running back that I put ahead of him that we'll get to in a bit that fits our threshold. But yeah, Bam Knight 12% rostered on Yahoo League, so very much out there. But the thing with Bam Knight is Vidal and Haskins, it was clear who RB1 was, right? But with the Cardinals, it was a little murkier here because Michael Carter is still around here, and Bam Knight played 27 snaps compared to 32 for Michael Carter. He only got 2 more carries, but they had the same amount of yards. Bam Knight's long was 7 yards, so it's not like he's busting off big plays. And then Michael Carter ran 21 routes and got 4 targets compared to Bam Knight getting 13 routes and only 1 target. So that's a concern there that it's far more close of a timeshare than it looks like. I mean, the fantasy points were different this week because Bam Knight got the touchdown. And of course, he got his 1 catch was 20 yards, but it's far more of a committee there than it is with the Chargers here. And then, of course, like you said, Knight has the Packers, who are very good against the run, especially if they get Wyatt back. And then they have a bye. So by the time after that bye, he's going to be a cut candidate during the bye week because buys are about to get really, really serious. And then overall, it's just offensive uncertainty here. I don't know, maybe Kyler Murray will be back. He didn't really practice all week, I don't think. And Jacoby Brissett ended up getting the start here. Then, of course, Marvin Harrison has that concussion. So they're severely depleted on offense. I don't know if you want to be really stacking up, Cardinals options in a game where, even though they're the home team, I'd be shocked if they scored 20 points. The Packers defense seems to have it together again after their bye week. And, they'll be heading west. But
I would not say that. I don't know how you watch that Packer game and think the Packers defense had things in check. But let's expand this further. Yeah. So you have Tyjae Spears as your second pickup. He didn't even make my list at all on the waiver wire part of things. I want nothing to do with that Titans offense. Tyjae Spears gets banged up all the time, and he's in a committee with Tony Pollard too. So in my mind, Bam Knight is far more rosterable than Tyjae Spears, but maybe give me the opposite side of this. Why do you like Tyjae Spears more than Bam Knight?
Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of factors there. He actually outsnapped Tony Pollard. This is only his second game back, and he played 36 snaps compared to 26 snaps for Tony Pollard, and he ran twice as many routes. He is pretty clearly the pass catching back in a team that's going to play from behind for the majority of this whole situation. Still got half the carries as Pollard, but almost as effective. Pollard had 10 for 34, and that was benefited by a 17-yard rush. Spears only had 5 carries, but 31 yards. And, of course, he got 4 targets for 19. There might be more targets to go around. Calvin Ridley got hurt there with the hamstring injury. You know, that could send a couple towards the backfield here, especially with the rookie quarterback. And his bye's a little bit further down the road. Now, it's a bit of a tougher schedule here. You know, I use full PPR for Tajay Spears because that's what we're looking at. Got the Patriots this week, who are 4th against backs in PPR, then the Colts, who are 8, and then the Chargers, who are 14 before their bye. So the upcoming schedule is a little bit tougher, but I think Spears is trending more in the right direction than someone like Bam Knight. I mean, both of these offenses are pretty inept, but at least the Titans have more of their guys than the Cardinals do. Spears is widely available. He's only 24% rostered. And just based on, you know, he came back from the injury, was used limited, and then the second week back, you know, he's getting more time on the field than Pollard. So it's more for PPR, right? It could come down to standard league Bam Knight, PPR Tajay Spears, because I think Spears gives you a higher floor. If you're looking to throw back out there, like, you're going to get 4 or 5 points just from pass catching. And then there's also the possibility, like we've seen, you know, we'll see how healthy Spears is, but we've seen and how long it'll last, you know, like you like to mention, but he does have the possibility to bust off a big play that results in 10, 12 fantasy points for you. And that could be the difference maker when you're trying to plug and play. So I put Spears a little bit higher because, you know, a bit of a proven commodity and the PPR upside.
How would you juxtapose that with a Woody Marks, who a couple weeks ago was our top waiver wire pickup? We were pounding the table for him. Texans not coming off a bye. They have a tough matchup this week, and frankly, their offense hasn't been very good overall. But like when I'm thinking of the Tajay Spears or even Bam Knights, and we've had questions in the chat too, I would rather have Woody Marks, even if he is in a committee with Nick Chubb, and we don't really know. You think back to last night play, that they were annihilating the Cooper Rush Ravens, and Nick Chubb ended up getting a lot of junk time production. I would rather have Woody Marks because I think he's got the draft capital that would matter and is in a better offense than Tennessee or Arizona. So how are you kind of summing up that?
In my mind. Woody Marks ranks ahead of all these guys. I mean, he ranks ahead of Vidal even for me, just because Marks has far more long-term utility than Vidal, because obviously there's the Hampton return eventually, and then of course the possibility they pick somebody up. I think the Texans are kind of set with where they are. Maybe Mixon comes back, but we haven't heard anything at all to suggest that is reasonably possible. So yeah, Marks is above and beyond. And we said that when we did the show, right? Like we had a much higher FAAB recommendation for Marks than I would throw out there for even Vidal.
Well, and I think some people, and rightfully so, will say we were wrong because 2 weeks ago we're almost chasing the Marks high. Then Nick Chubb does what he does against the Ravens. I feel like I've had a very good pulse on this Chargers backfield the entire year, but especially post-Amari and Hampton injury. We had reports earlier this weekend that the Chargers were sniffing around running backs. I don't think anyone had been saying that previously outside of us on the show. I feel it's real. I mean, if you are the Chargers, you have postseason aspirations. You're dealing with a litany of injuries, but it's not season-ending variety. It's not like Derwin James out for the year outside of Rashawn Slater. Like the Chargers have an opportunity here to do something in an AFC West that's winnable, and if that means making that running back position as safe as possible with the options out there, I really believe they're going to do it. But we don't know when, and that's why Vidal, I think, is kind of the uncertainty. If you told me for sure the Chargers don't even trade for Jerome Ford, like that level of backup running back, then I think Vidal might move ahead for Woody Marks. He'll at least be in that range. But as of right now, with the way I feel like I'm got the situation broke down, that's kind of how I'm going with this.
I also think it's too early to say we were wrong on Woody Marks. It was one week in which the game flow didn't really affect what he does best. So we'll definitely see here in the coming weeks. But it's far too early to take an L on that one.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as well, too. I just was acknowledging what the chat might be able to say with us pushing Woody Marks as high as they have been, or as far as we have been a couple weeks ago. Continuing with the top 5 list, again, a lackluster waiver wire period overall, either due to injuries at the top and then situations being muddled, or even more muddled situations becoming more gross. I think that kind of is the way I describe it for the receiver position. Thankfully, this might be a scenario in full-point PPR leagues where you start a tight end and have a tight end and a flex, because we had Arondé Gadsden emerge as one, and then Harold Fandon with David Njoku possibly out for an extended time with that knee injury, now becomes the guy in Cleveland as well, who Dylan Gabriel, 52 attempts. Did you know he threw 52 times against the Steelers? He had less,
I did not realize that, but obviously that is
yards.
not... Because I was looking, Judy actually did something this week after he was my drop candidate, but of course he has to. He only caught 5 of his 13 targets. That's something. But what stood out to me is obviously I spent an embarrassing amount of FAAB on Njoku this week and the people that dropped him. Which, in hindsight, you don't know the injuries coming, right? So I'm not quite ready to take an L on that. Maybe he comes back. He was a little more active and running more routes than Fannin at the time here, and it looked like Dylan Gabriel was going to go to him with frequently. But of course, David Njoku hurts his knee. We don't know if he's going to miss time or not. And in his stead, Harold Fannin is out there. Number 10 targets, which is the second most on the team, caught 7 of them for 81 yards. Of course, didn't find the end zone there because the whole team didn't find the end zone at all in a relatively tough matchup here. But I put Fannin as my number 3 pick because he was down to 27% rostered. And he is not only just a possible tight end start, but a possible flex here, coming up. So I'm definitely about Fannin here. I know we kind of take an L on Mason Taylor. He could go there too because he's around the same ownership. Mason Taylor, I could easily put him there. I kind of give him a discount because it was the Broncos. But Mason Taylor in the next 2 weeks gets Carolina, who is 31st against tight ends, and Cincinnati, who is 32nd here. He had a tough matchup, but now there's a possible Garrett Wilson injury. We're going to get an update on that tomorrow, apparently. Mason Taylor could be a huge target hog. Now, you could also say that this offense is totally and completely inept. And the reason I put Fannin here over Taylor is because Fannin has been more productive throughout the course of the season, and he's coming off a 10-target week. So I put him there, but Mason Taylor will be someone that, is worth discussing with tight ends. But overall, I put Fannin as my number 3 priority ad here.
I think that's the right call. I would rather have Fannin over Gadsden, and I think Gadsden, the rookie tight end for the Chargers, ended up having a career game for Sunday as well too, and that come from behind win. It was a lot of check down stuff. I do the Charger notes for us, and I guess everywhere else out there if you're reading on ESPN or other platforms. And I've talked about in those past notes the poor offensive line play and also all the injuries to LA's offensive linemen have made it so they have to have multiple tight ends in to block. In the scenarios in which they can't do that, then Gadsden's been able to do really well. And I thought, again, watching what happened Sunday, that was the perfect best case scenario for Gadsden. Whereas Fannin's going to be just literally the top target getter because Dylan Gabriel can't throw more than 5 yards and can't look to the boundary at all. It's just literally here's the middle of the field, throw to Njoku, throw to Fannin, then punt after 15 times throughout the game. So I think both of them are great options. I would rather have Mason Taylor over Gadsden, but I think you could argue that Harold Fannin now, if Njoku misses time, is possibly more valuable than Mason Taylor, given how inept the Jets' offense has been. And then I'll throw one more tight end in there, so we're kind of like just doing this group with Brock Bowers sidelined again this past week. Michael Mayer scores a touchdown, gets a bit more volume for the Raiders. Now, they were in a good matchup against this lowly Titans team overall. Raiders also on bye week 8. I think Las Vegas is one of the stupidest teams in the NFL. They might throw Brock Bowers out there because they are that dumb. But in my mind, if a guy's been dealing with a knee injury all year, he kept him out the previous two weeks, just don't play him the week before the bye. Yeah, and if Brock Bowers is not out there, Michael Mayer becomes a top pickup, I think, for me too.
Yeah, as things stand, Bowers is likely to remain out through week 7. We hope they do the smart thing there, I guess. But without Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer caught 5 of 7 targets for 50 yards and a score. He was up there. He was out there for 52 snaps, which is the same as Trey Tucker, tied for the most among all the skill positions that aren't, quarterbacks or linemen here. And also Michael Mayer had a 32% target share and ran a route on 80% of dropbacks. He is 100% a plug-and-play option this week. He just didn't make my top 5 because it really is a 1-week thing. Because even if he has a decent game this week, you're probably cutting him because there's a bye. Exactly. And then Bowers is back. So that's the tough part there here. So he didn't quite make the top 5, but definitely he's an ad that you should be looking at, and someone that, I actually saw a lot of that leagues, people pick him up midweek. But he's someone that you can maybe look at just to see if he clears waivers and you need a tight end or a flex.
I picked up Cade Otton in a few places with all the Buccaneers injuries. He remains an option too. Somebody in the chat mentions A.J. Barner with the Seahawks and how good they have been. I think A.J. Barner's an option. I'm only saying this like we play in the Scott Fish Bowl, for example. There's a bunch of deep league formats where you could use multiple flexes. This week might be where you end up there might be like 20 tight ends that are starting over the course of the whole fantasy league because the receiver options are so bleak. And let's get to the quarterbacks and receivers here because we're going to kind of just dive into this as a conglomerate. Again, we talked about our top 5 list. I think it's very low outside of Kimani Vidal. Before we get into the quarterback streamer options and therefore the last of your top 5 options, Jake, let's get to Chalkboard here. Cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. 20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or just hammering the daily promos like I like to do often. It's been a lot of fun using the Chalkboard stuff throughout this NFL season. Today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports, now available in 30-plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to get 20 free with no deposit required. You had Jaxson Dart on your top 5 quarterback list. And Jake, I looked at Dart. I thought about it a little bit when I was doing the Waiver Wire article again, which will be posted later on the site, or like later today, I should say. I couldn't get there. And I understand why you ended up doing it as a long-term play. Mm-hmm. But for just this week, if you are trying to stream quarterback replacing, I don't know, Lamar Jackson, I know he's on bye. Hopefully you've already replaced him before, but Josh Allen, certainly, I think they're a better option. So let's go over this a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, I put Jaxson Dart as my number 4 pickup option and noted like 4 times in our outline that it's really a long-term play. It's not for this week. He has the Broncos this week. It's one of the toughest matchups that there is, and definitely a streaming option at all. But out of the 2 matchups this week, so really, the guys that have been standing out that are readily available are Jaxson Dart, he's 32% rostered, and Sam Darnold, who's 38% rostered.
Yep.
And of course, Dart has Denver coming up second against opposing quarterbacks. Guess who's first? Who Sam Darnold happens to play. Houston's actually been very good at defending opposing quarterbacks, limiting their fantasy points here. So while Sam Darnold and Jaxson Dart are both excellent long-term plays, you're probably looking somewhere else for streamers this week. But I don't know. For example, I have Dak Prescott in one league, 12-team league, and I don't have a second quarterback. And if I can, I might grab Jaxson Dart, knowing I'm not necessarily starting him this week.
Perfect example. Yes, I like this. Okay, keep going.
Exactly. So there's just a scenario in which it happened. And I made Jaxson Dart my number 4 pickup here. The one big thing is he's averaging around 55 rushing yards per game in his 3 starts. So that's 5 fantasy points just from rushing. And maybe he houses one of those, and maybe he throws it to the ragtag bunch of receivers that he has here. But obviously some upside there. He's a man of the future. Scadaboo's helping carrying that offense and doing the bowling ball thing. But no, Jaxson Dart to me is passing the eye test and is a good. I put him ahead of Darnold in the long-term plays because Darnold obviously isn't going to get that rushing, and that was the difference maker for me here. You want to have that from your fantasy quarterback. So Dart's the long-term play. But if you're looking for a one-and-done stream this week, I ran through a whole bunch of options. Other one that I'm sorry.
I just said it's tough. It's a bleak list if you're trying to stream this week.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, he's only 19% rostered. He looked pretty good against a good Browns defense this week, and he's at Cincinnati. Now, granted, he's on the road, and it is Thursday Night Football, so you have a short week. But, it's Cincinnati and essentially the Cowboys are the 2 matchups that you're targeting for quarterbacks. So if you need a one and done, I think you might grab Rodgers this week, but you'll be doing that at the expense of somebody else probably grabbing Dart or Darnold. And, making that you won't be able to have that long-term play in your back pocket there. So, Rodgers is a streamer. I think you had a different one in your article that's worth hitting.
Yeah, I ended up mentioning Michael Penix. Now, again, I wrote the article prior to Monday's game against the Bills. We're recording prior to Monday's game. Darnell Mooney's not out there as well, too. If there's more injuries to the Falcons pass-catching group post Monday's matchup here, that hurts things, obviously. But the Niners lost Fred Warren. They've been pretty susceptible to the passing game all season long. You talked about the tough strength of schedule for Jaxson Dart here. He has the Broncos, Eagles, and then faces the Niners, which is a defense that I was including as like a tough matchup. Maybe not so much anymore with the way that the Niners keep having injuries. So you could do a lot worse. Again, we try to target quarterbacks under 50% rostered. You look at the other guys like Dart, like Sam Darnold with the difficult matchups. Tua also against the Dolphins, for example. I'm sorry, against the Browns. Tua plays in the Dolphins. It's just really tough. So Michael Penix is the only other one that I was kind of thinking of in that range. I like the Aaron Rodgers call. I'd probably play Penix over Aaron Rodgers, but I don't mind either one. And I can guarantee you if you're playing me against me in a lineup, Rodgers will go off because I've gotten like 30-point bombed on Thursday. It feels like all 6 weeks of the season. So there is that too, Jake.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's pretty much what you're looking at there. Of course, Penix has a little more rushing upside, and like you said, Tua has always been in the streaming conversation, but I'm not sure I'd play him on the road in Cleveland necessarily.
Right.
And then as far as Superflex updates, most of this stuff is old news after this week, but it wasn't at the time of last show. Joe Flacco gets traded to the Bengals midweek. He actually looked okay in a short week debut. I mean, imagine a veteran like him can pick up the core aspects of a playbook in relatively short notice. But obviously, Joe Flacco has weapons. He was used getting the ball to Jamar Chase. The Packers kind of a lot of soft coverage there. I think that's by design. But Chase owners at least have some hope. So it looks like Joe Flacco until December for the Bengals here. Looking to the Vikings, JJ McCarthy apparently is still uncertain for Week 7 after his bye. He's still not 100%. And Carson Wentz also has that injury in his non-throwing shoulder. So the Vikings are going to be way up in the air. I imagine one of those come back, but otherwise they could basically be punting a game against the Eagles this week. So you can watch that for deep super flex leagues. And then, of course, we touched on it with the Cardinals, but Kyler Murray had a foot injury in Week 6. We didn't really know it at the time of the show. He didn't practice at all Wednesday and Thursday. He did come back to practice Friday, but was ultimately deemed inactive following his questionable designation. Jacoby Brissett got the start. Not super great, but not terrible either. 27 for 44, 2 touchdowns and a pick. They put up 27 in the road loss to Indianapolis. So, a lot of Jacoby Brissett getting picked up for Superflex this week. But that's going to be ugly against the Packers this week.
I was going to say, who as a Packer fan would you rather the Cardinals have a quarterback, Kyler Murray or Jacoby Brissett? I know my answer.
Brissett, because he's more sackable. Murray runs around
I would rather have Kyler Murray out there. I have much more confidence that the Cardinals offense will be off schedule and therefore not as easily able to hit those like 7-yard slants if it's Jacoby Brissett throwing it. But we'll get to the receivers here in a little bit. They're also dealing with a bunch of injuries there as well, too. And this is the one receiving core, which I think Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon can actually match up well, too. So it's bleak regardless. I have more faith in the Packers beating the Cardinals this week than I did the Packers beating the Bengals last week. But we'll have to see as the injuries kind of mount up for Arizona. Before we get to the running backs here and talk about the Michael Carter Bam Knight conundrum that was at least this past week, let's get a word for our sponsors. Circa Stadium Swim. It's football season, of course, and the best place to catch the games is at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. Stadium Swim has 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143-foot diagonal screen, whether it's Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. No matter the size of your group, Stadium Swim is the place for you. From owner suites to cabanas, day beds to stadium booths, there's always a seating choice for everyone available. And the best part, Stadium Swim is open 365 days a year. With temperature-controlled pools, it's a great place to catch the games all season long. Stadium Swim located at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Book today at circalasvegas.com. All right, we had kind of went over this running back crew outside of Kimani Vidal. I would almost argue that there really isn't somebody I want to go and pick up. You made a good argument, I think, for Tajay Spears, although I strongly believe Tony Pollard, unless he gets traded, which is possible, is just going to complicate things in one of the league's worst, if not the worst offense. But outside of that, it's tough. There really just isn't a lot of running back options overall.
Exactly. And to recap, the argument for Spears was the fact that in his second week back from injury, he came out and played 10 more snaps than Pollard, which is significant. And just the way that this team is, they'll be playing from behind, needing a pass catching back more often here. We talked about the Cardinals' messy backfield there too. Outside of those names, Vidal, Spears, and Knight, there's not a whole lot to look for. Kendre Miller is still on the radar. He meets our threshold. He got 8 carries to Kamara's 10, only 19 snaps to Kamara's 33. So eating just enough of the workload to, be an emergency option if you need it with some upside should anything happen, trade or injury to Kamara. I also wanted to note Sean Tucker of the Bucs. He scored a rushing touchdown this week. Maybe he's a little more involved just as a skill guy with all the receiver injuries they have. We'll talk about that in the next segment here. So he's a little bit interesting. And it looks like Bucky Irving's going to miss another week here. So, unfortunate for Bucky Irving owners, but Sean Tucker could be a dart throw. And again, another long-term play. I don't know who has the roster moves to do this, but Caleb Johnson actually got 11 snaps with a healthy backfield. So not doing much out of it. I don't know if that corner turns at any point, but maybe he's back on the radar, but he could also be safely left on the drop list. I put Blake Corum on the drop list because they were probably better handcuffs at this point, and he only had 12 snaps. He really wasn't doing a whole lot there in a game where they were leading. And then I don't know if I'm quite ready to can Tyrone Tracy yet, but he had really low usage in his first game back. It's Scadaboo's backfield, and Jaxson Dart's going to take rushing touchdowns. So a couple of possible drop options if you need a one for the buys.
Just circling back to the Caleb Johnson part of things, I would rather have Isaiah Davis for what it's worth over Caleb Johnson in the event Breece Hall does get traded from the 0-6 Jets. Otherwise, your guy, Jaden Blue.
Tyler Algier, I guess, too.
I think Algier's probably in that 30% roster threshold. I mean,
he's at 34. I mean, he's under our threshold, but as far as handcuffs go, he's ranks higher than Blake Corum at this point.
Yeah, that's fine. I again, we're talking about 66% of leagues is Algier available, whereas imagine Corum's 80, 85%. Isaiah Davis probably even more. And then your guy, Jaden Blue, with Miles Sanders out for the entire year, steps up a little bit more. Dallas's offense is really good. I don't know if it's a handcuff. I would rather have Tyrone Tracy than Jaden Blue if we're talking about handcuffs, but it is a difficult conversation. With multiple bye weeks coming up here.
Yards for Blue, it's tough. I mean, they only ran the ball 19 times, but and a couple of those were from Dak.
It'll be really tricky. I agree. The running back position is pretty bleak if you are in need of a James Cook, Derrick Henry replacement, and unfortunately there really isn't a lot of options outside of trades.
You're going to have to overspend for Vidal more than he's actually worth if you want to have a respectable plug and play this week, and you just have to make your decision. Are you sitting with 80% of your FAAB right now? Do you want to use some to cover that, or do you want to save some for the end when somebody else emerges?
Let's get to the conundrum that is the receiver position here. First, get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Okay, we're back. And again, talking about the receiver group, we mentioned our top 5, top 10 waiver wire list. In reality, you could probably sprinkle in a bunch of receivers. We're recording this mid-afternoon Monday. We have multiple Monday Night Football games to come as well, too. Mm-hmm. We have very little information about a number of critical injuries and practice stats of possibly returning players like Mike Evans or CeeDee Lamb. So I expect this is the one part of the podcast which will end up being, I don't know, outdated by even Tuesday at a certain point. But here's the information.
We're going to give you 6-8 names, and chances are 2 or 3 of them are going to end up being very addable and maybe even startable, 3 days down the road or whatever. Right. And I have to start with Kendrick Bourne, who we mentioned last week. We got another week of Matt Jones. Kendrick Bourne's still only 35% rostered. He had another very impressive stat line, targeted 9 times, caught 5 of them for 142. There's just chemistry with Mac Jones. I don't know if that's back to their dates and their time in New England, but that's there. And that was with Juwan Jennings back from his rib injury, but also allegedly playing with 4 broken ribs. So, not much there. But Kendrick Bourne, 85% route participation. And the downside is does he keep that up when Purdy comes back? Maybe Ricky Pearsall comes back. Maybe Juwan Jennings gets more involved. So I'm not rushing to run out and add or start Bourne because we noted this last week. It was short term. We turned out to get another week of utility out of him with Pearsall out. But, for him being the first guy we mentioned and there being some of those flags beyond there. But, at what point does he keep busting off 140-yard games and they have to keep him involved in the offense? Maybe that's a possibility as well. But, we'll see what happens as they get healthier there. I also put a note on Christian Kirk. He's only 27% off. He's coming off bye. Decent matchups at Seattle, who's 19, and versus San Francisco, who's 13. Even leading up to the bye after his return, in terms of snaps and routes, he was basically wide receiver 2 in Houston. Obviously, Nico Collins getting the bulk of the volume there, but Kirk almost scored the week before the bye, and I think he'll have a breakout game in there. So he's possibly someone that you could look at. And then after that, I wrote down Zay Jones from the Cardinals. Again, we go back to this. Do we really want much of the Cardinals there? But with Marvin Harrison leaving the game, due to that concussion. It was Zay Jones who led the team in yards, caught 5 of his 8 targets for 79 yards. Now Trey McBride is getting the big time edge there with 11 targets. But, Michael Wilson was the fantasy guy that had been discussed in the past. He caught 4 or 5 for 44, so you could almost put him on the same level. But it was Zay Jones who, 55 snaps. Michael Wilson only had 52 snaps, and Zay Jones got the targets. And, they got the Packers, and then they got their bye. So, Zay Jones is probably a desperation move you decide on Sunday morning. But right after the bye at Dallas, but then Marvin Harrison will be back, and who knows what that offense will look like. So Zay Jones is interesting, too.
Jake, I'll jump in here for you, Jake, here, because I want to kind of contextualize this for a lot of folks. If Marvin Harrison is out with a concussion, again, the Cardinals are on a week 8 bye. It's entirely possible the team plays it safe. I would rather have Zay Jones probably even over like a Kendrick Bourne, possibly. It might be in that same sort of spot. We don't know, though, again, as we're recording this Monday. And I think going further into this list, the Buccaneers receiving core is actually one of those that I would love to capitalize on. This is a really good matchup for the Tampa Bay passing attack. We don't know between the 3 of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Emeka Egbuka who is all going to be able to play. And if it is Mike Evans returning, it's possible that he just gets a bunch of volume. It sounds like Chris Godwin of the 3 is the most unlikely to play, but we have not heard good news early morning about Emeka Egbuka, and I think it sounds like he will at least miss this week as well, too. Yep. So even if there is just Mike Evans and then something else, if we get the and then something else correct from Tampa Bay, I would rather have that person, too. The only issue is I couldn't tell you who it is, and I have been getting these things so wrong. I think back to Jalen Tolbert 2 weeks ago. I'd recommend Ryan Flournoy this past week. Neither one were correct. It feels like a similar spot, and between Cameron Johnson and Tez Johnson, I'm very nervous that whatever one I say I want will be the one that ends up not doing anything at all.
Yeah, well, let's run it down here. Chris Godwin apparently has a fibula injury that's unrelated to the one. They're trying to cover their butt. They're saying they didn't bring him back too early. Didn't practice all last week. He's not expected for week 7. We've got that. Mike Evans with a hamstring injury didn't practice at all last week either. There's optimism for practice this week is what our last note has. I mean, optimism for practice is a far, far cry than ready to suit up here.
Right.
And then you have Egbuka, who's expected to miss time with a hamstring injury. All 3 of those guys are hurt, and it's very possible that all of those guys are out. Could the answer in that case then be Cade Otton, who you mentioned earlier? He went out and played all of the offensive snaps this week and had a 26% target share. So that's interesting. Right there. But the receivers, if you go to the receiver depth chart, you're looking at Cameron Johnson and Tez Johnson. Cameron Johnson is a second-year UD undrafted free agent out of a school I've never heard of, Barton or something like that. He's basically a kick returner in his special teams. He ends up catching all 4 of his targets for 64 yards and a touchdown on 26 snaps. Then we have the other Johnson, Tez Johnson. He played 36 snaps, so 10 more snaps than Cameron Johnson. He was actually drafted. He's a rookie 7th-round pick out of Oregon. He caught 1 of his 3 targets for 45 yards and a touchdown, basically one big play.
It was that awesome catch on a blown coverage.
Yeah, fair enough. And then also the week before, he had 4 targets, caught 4 of them for 59, and I believe he scored 2 the week before. So I think the answer is you lean Tez Johnson if all 3 receivers are out. It's definitely a bit of a long shot play, but they're at Detroit this week, who's 29 against opposing receivers, and then at New Orleans the following week here. So Tez Johnson should be on the list. If you're running waivers on Tuesday, he might clear, and then you can grab him without sacrificing a waiver spot or FAAB. But if I had to pick Monday, a little before noon or 2:00 Eastern time, then I guess Tez Johnson would be the name that you throw in there and add. But I'm not giving up much, if any, waiver capital for him, just because we don't know what this injury report is going to look like.
It's entirely possible that one of Tez or Cameron Johnson or both outscores Zay Jones, even if Marvin Harrison is inactive for the Cardinals this week. It's entirely possible.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
But there's Sterling Shepard as part of this factor too. If Mike Evans does come back, maybe that cuts into the workload a little bit more. You had talked about Cade Otton. I think one of the only areas in which the Lions are still healthy is their linebacking core, which would cut into the opportunities for Cade Otton. I think I saw on the broadcast last night, the Lions at one point were missing 5 of their preferred starting members in the secondary, and will likely lose Brian Branch for being stupid with the post-game altercation as well too. Like, this could be a very depleted secondary, and we know the Buccaneers love to pass the ball. So like, I really want a piece of this Buccaneers offense. It's just a fool's gold of trying to guess who it is. And again, I've been wrong every single time recommending one of these. Stay tuned to the Waiver Wire article. I'm sure Jake and I will be talking about it on social media as well too, about who's the preferred one of this group. I agree with you. I'm leaning more towards Tez Johnson as the guy that maybe could get 3 or 4 catches for 60 yards. Like, that's sort of the floor I see if everything breaks the way we've seen. And then if you want to dive into this a bit further, figure out which one of the Rams receivers outside Devontae Adams is going to be a bigger deal, because Puka Nacua has the ankle injury. It sounds like he's going to miss some time. And Tutu Atwell didn't play this past week due to a hamstring injury. I don't know who it's going to be. And the Rams also have a bye coming up as well too.
Exactly, yeah. So Devontae Adams will obviously be the top dog there. I think it's pretty much confirmed that Puka Nacua is going to miss some time. It's a matter of how much. And then, yeah, like you said, Tutu Atwell was inactive with a hamstring injury. Maybe if he comes back, that's interesting. But the way it is now, Jordan Whittington was next in line for wide receiver snaps. He caught 3 of his 4 targets for 23 yards on 47 snaps. He actually had more snaps than Devontae Adams. And that's another situation where might it actually be Tyler Higbee getting more involved, one of the tight ends there.
Gosh.
He was targeted 4 times too. So it gets really messy. And granted, they didn't have to throw the ball a bunch. I know it was only 17-3, but they were always in control of the Ravens, who are pretty much hapless with Cooper Rush there at quarterback. So I don't know. Rams are interesting. And in the same vein, you could look at little Jordan Humphrey, came off the practice squad on Thursday Night Football against the Eagles, was targeted 8 times, caught 4 of them for 55, played 53 snaps. He was essentially the wide receiver 2 to Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, does the Giants wide receiver 2 have any fantasy reliability, especially going into this matchup, against the Broncos on a team that wants to pound the ball on the ground? So, maybe not, but, this is where we're stretching here. You mentioned the Cowboys in Florida. Jalen Tolbert actually ran more routes and is getting targeted. It's not turning into any production. Tolbert has 1 catch for 8 yards. Florida has 3 for 30. Wait a minute. He didn't out-target Florida. That was a mistake here. He had 6 to Tolbert's 1, but Tolbert's running more routes. He's just not getting looked at. So I'm not messing with Cowboys wide receiver 2, especially after seeing
Lamb could be coming back as well. Yeah.
And then, just throwing it out there, but Christian Watson's only 9% rostered, and he's close to returning. His window is open, so that's interesting. I'm not putting I have him in 2 leagues. I grabbed him in 1 crazy deep league, and I have him in a dynasty league still. He's kind of a boomer bust, big play guy. We've confirmed pretty much that Romeo Doubs is the possession receiver. Dontavion Wicks did leave with an ankle injury, so that's worth monitoring. And Matthew Golden, it wasn't quite a true breakout game, but he looked really, really good. That was one bright spot here, Matthew Golden for the Packers. So, maybe Watson doesn't see the field a ton, but there were times when, in Love's rookie year, or his first year as a starter, especially, he was very much a throw the ball up to Watson when in trouble type guy. And Watson does have that athleticism. He's just never been able to stay healthy. But apparently his rehab's going well, and they're excited for him to come back. So maybe worth a stash if you have to when bye weeks are about to get tough.
All right, let's tie a bow on these receivers, Jake, and let's assume the worst case for everything. So ignore the Kendrick Bournes and Christian Kirks of the world. Between Zay Johnson, the Buccaneers, and the Rams guys, is there one that would be a priority ad after waiver wire processes? I.e., you don't have to spend anything from a FAAB perspective. You're just going to go ahead and grab one of these guys. How do you sort that through? Because I think for a lot of folks, this might be something that at least shuttle their bottom of their rosters for.
It's Tez Johnson, because out of all those offenses, Tampa Bay's the best. Baker's the best quarterback. Baker's having an MVP year. You trust the guy with Baker and the Bucs, a team that has it together to some degree. And yeah, I think it's Tez Johnson. You throw, if I had to pick my 1 touchdown guy, I would say Tez Johnson's more likely to score than counting on the Cardinals to move the ball in any capacity. So yeah, that's the answer, and he's available everywhere.
I think it's the matchup again with all the secondary pieces the Lions are missing. I'm with you. I'm just nervous to give a call because I guarantee you whatever one it is, it's going to be the opposite side of things for the Buccaneers. That's the way my waiver wire luck has ran.
Yeah, even though like I'm picking Tez Johnson now, there's a reason no receivers made my top 5.
Right,
in a week where Nakua goes down and Igbokwe goes down and Marvin Harrison goes down. There's just not. It's not like running backs where there's a clear 1-for-1. It's murky, and you're gonna have to watch the injury reports this week. There's a chance someone emerges later in the week, or who knows, maybe another injury pops up to somewhere else later in the week that gives you a better option. Just one of the challenges of doing this show on Monday, early afternoon.
It's why, again, at top of the show, I said I think this will be a week where you could start multiple tight ends, and it's not just because the tight end position has been reliable, even if it's a bit of a floor play, but also that there's going to be more that kind of add to this, at least from a waiver wire perspective. We'll get to those guys right here in a second. First, a word from our sponsors, Mega Sports. Elevate your game with the ultimate sports contest, Mega Sports Progressive. Dive into a world of excitement with 3 Progressive jackpots and a chance to win big every week and every month. Rewarding 1,500 lucky winners, distributing over 50,000 in monthly prizes. All you do is answer 15 daily sports props. Add up your correct responses for the week's cash prize and tally the week's total for huge monthly cash rewards. Mega Sports Pro makes it fun and easy to join, and this is a thrilling opportunity, of course, because you can be part of a growing community of sports enthusiasts. Sign up today and unlock a chance to win big every day, every week, and every month. Sign up for free. No commitments, no credit cards required. Your first 9 days of play are free. Visit megasportspro.com today. I talked about the tight end position during the top of the show. Overall, I think we've added some names to the list. Mason Taylor, despite a tough matchup, is somebody I'm not really fading yet. I think he's going to be more involved in that Jets offense and have a good next 2 weeks as well, too. And then Theo Johnson.
Mason Taylor on DraftKings this week or whatever. Side of your choice. He's going to be bottom barrel price, and he's going to get 12 targets, whether he does something with that or not. But as far as min price and high ceiling, Mason Taylor in DFS.
Yeah, Theo Johnson was the Giants guy that we talked about last week as well, too. Didn't do a whole lot in that Eagles win, but it was a lot more of the Jaxson Dart Cam Scadaboo show. And then Jake Tongas ended up being fine, too. But Kittle might still not be back this week. We'll have to see with the Niners. So adding to that list of the Mason Taylor, Tongas is Harold Fannin here with David Njoku, possibly out with a knee injury. Again, gets those 10 targets. And then also, if we want to even kind of expand on this further, you go to like the Oronde Gadsden for the Chargers has a good game as well, too, along with another list of guys that I think is at least expansive, right, Jake?
Yeah, Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin, Michael Mayer, Cade Otton, all could be flex options this week.
Yep.
If you had to do that. AJ Barner is interesting. He had one big play. He didn't score. He's kind of TD or bust. I mentioned Tyler Higbee with all the Rams injuries, caught 4 for 40, and I believe he scored the touchdown. So that's interesting. I mean, Isaiah Likely, another bad stat line. And of course, they're coming up on bye, but he did run more routes than Mark Andrews for the first time all year. And Andrews may or may not be on the trade block. I saw some rumors floating around there. So, Likely, but that's obviously a longer term play. And very few of us have the bench spot space there. But, there's a ton of tight ends out there that are going to be readily available that are going to be. I've been sitting on Cade Otton and Fishbowl, and I might actually play him this week.
I had to play him in Fishbowl. Ended up working out, actually. We're moving on close to the playoffs here. We're already there at this point. For a lot of early injuries, I have Bucky, I have Chuba, I had Tyreek Hill on that team, and somehow I'm still 9-3. It'll be interesting to watch as the Scott Fishbowl progresses. But yeah, overall, the tight end group, especially if you're in points premium leagues, I think there's a bunch of names. Again, Mason Taylor and Gadsden probably already picked up, but I think you could add Cade Otton to that list. Certainly, Michael Mayer, if Brock Bowers is inevitably ruled out for one final week with the Raiders on bye, and expanding it further. I like the Higbee call too.
5% confidence right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Defenses from a streaming perspective. I mean, there's a few options. We still have some bad teams playing. It's going to get a lot dicier come week 8 with 6 teams on bye. But who are we looking at for streaming defenses?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty tough one here. So again, I'm focusing on home teams. The Browns are at home against the Dolphins. They're the home team. Their defense has been playing all right. But Miami's a dumpster fire. I mean, I thought that team would be talented enough to win a few games, but now you got Tua coming out there calling out guys for not going to players only meetings. I mean, it's possible they're trying to do a case of overdoing the players only meetings. And people just kind of get sick of it. Like, no, screw that. I'm going to my family instead. Or, I'm going bowling or whatever the heck's going on here. But, it's messy. And if they go out and lose, coach is going to be gone. But the Browns are interesting. home against Miami. Man, I'm sure Tua is going to see Myles Garrett and his nightmares this week. And, we'll see what happens there. So that's interesting. Again, now, not good defenses this year, but home teams with subpar opponents. The Jets are at home against the Panthers in what could be the possible lowest over-under game of the week here. They're only 10% rostered here. And with the Jets, defense hasn't necessarily, this has been their story over the whole year, but they only gave up 13 points to the Broncos. So, defense isn't the problem here necessarily. And I would say the Cardinals offense, or the Panthers offense is worse than the Broncos. So that's an option. And, another home team, we'll see how the Bears defense looks tonight, but they're only 6% rostered, and they're home against the Saints, who offensively actually have shown flashes at times here, but, it's still Spencer Rattler. They're still on the road, at Soldier Field here. So the streaming defenses options aren't great, but the Browns, the Jets, and the Bears are probably what you're looking at, or at the very least, maybe some cheap options on DraftKings.
Yeah, it's not ideal listing off those. Like, you talk about the Jets defense, that's actually been the part that I thought was been really bad this year, and then play the Broncos, who inexplicably are varying degrees of dumb or dumber when Sean Payton wants to make things worse, and maybe the London overseas thing's part of it too. Or the Broncos have said, hey, well, I know the Jets aren't going to beat us because they can't literally pass the ball. So what if we just play ultra conservative? I don't think that's the Jets that did well anything or did anything positive defensively. And you look at the Bears, for example, missing all the defense pieces they are. Spencer Rattler in the Saints a big gamey, but it isn't a great spot to be to say, I want to go ahead and have the Bears and secondary that's been mangled here for the first.
Throw all the story off to the side. You grab home teams playing struggling offenses in games with a low over-under is essentially, what you almost do like an ABC situation where you throw the stats but not actually the teams, and these ones would match up. You'd be like, oh, that seems like a fine streaming defense. So, that's what we're looking at here. But yeah, it's they're all short-term plays very much.
Well, there you go. That does it for us on this week's edition of the RotoWire Waiver Wire podcast. Of course, we'll be back in next Monday as well, too, preparing you for 6 teams on bye week 8, 4 teams on bye week 9,
begins.
4 teams on bye week 10. We will be entering this stretch of Byemageddon, so hopefully be prepared if your rosters can afford to do so, and we'll be back again to go over what will be a disaster, I'm sure, for a lot of folks next week. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
A lot of carnage. In the meantime, go Brewers.
Go Brewers.